Awesome. So, welcome. Do you go Matthew or Matt? How do you roll?
Matthew, Matt,
Matthew?
either one. Yeah.
You're more formal though. You prefer the Matthew?
Well, I do the formal on the book titles but
Okay, is that
in my
it? Is,
in my day to day, it's Matt.
is that a bookseller? Should I be Philip Drysdale instead of Phil Drysdale?
I
Never
have
looking
no,
forward
I
to
don't,
books.
I don't know. Don't ask me, man.
I also wonder about that you always add an initial, right? It feels like if you've got a middle name, you're going to sell more books. Like that just feels like a way to go.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah.
just went with the J. I don't know why.
Awesome. Well, Matthew, I'm excited to have you. I don't know nearly enough about you. I know we've got lots of mutual friends from checking out your website and stuff. I know that I love where you're at, your stuff. It really fascinates me. I can tell you're pulling from similar streams. But why don't you kind of maybe give me a quick overview, but also the audience just kind of like, who are you? What are you about? What do you do day in, day out?
Yeah. Well, my quote unquote real job is I do social work.
Okay.
I worked in group homes, foster group homes for like 6, 7, 8 years. I can't remember how long. And now I'm working with folks with developmental disabilities. I'm running a program for independent living. But in addition to that, I guess it's like my side hustle or half hustle is writing. I've written now 6 books. I do 2 podcasts. I've written for Pathos and Sojourners and the Raven Foundation. And now I just write on my own blog. What else do I do? I have a music background. I play piano and guitar and drums. I don't sing. I've written hip hop, so I was in the middle of before this
Nice.
quarantine. I was recording a hip hop album. So I like to be diverse.
Dude, that's a lot of stuff.
It's a lot of stuff. I
I
also
feel like, man, I feel like
yeah
I'm like recording one podcast in the week and I'm like, "God, I've got a busy week this week. I got to record a podcast, maybe edit it up, get it online.
yeah
That's going to take time. Maybe I'll get some time to read a bit and study." You're like, you've written a book, while working as a social worker. Wow. Like,
right
I'm
yeah.
amazed. I'm amazed. How do you find time for it? Is that something do you manage like juggling lots of things well, or is that something you had to kind of develop?
Yeah, well, I don't do cocaine or anything, so I've had to do
Okay.
it naturally.
That's a big thing
No,
in
I
California is like the microdosing now, all the cool kids
uh,
on
uh,
in
I,
Silicon Valley. Is that not made
yeah,
up to Chico?
no, it hasn't. No, that seems to be a thing now. I've always been like I get really antsy and fidgety if I'm not doing something,
Okay.
and I do like my downtime, but at the same time, like I like to be doing something.
Yeah.
I get kind of bored easily, so I like to bounce around. And not that I don't stick with things. I've been doing one podcast for like 3 years,
Right.
and I don't plan on leaving or anything like that. But at the same time, like I like to fill my time with other stuff and have definitely a diverse range of interests. And
Sure.
I'm probably, it's a blessing and a curse. Like I could be a master at something, but I just am not. So I'm like decent at guitar. I'm okay at piano. I'm a decent drummer. I'm a good writer, but I'm not like the best writer in the world, So it's one
Well,
of
I
those
mean,
things.
only
Yeah.
6 books. I mean,
It doesn't mean they're good.
I saw one of them because I was flicking through your Facebook. I saw one of them had hit like number one. Is that right?
Well, yeah, I've
On
got a
Amazon
new.
somewhere.
Yeah, I've pretty happy that my friend Mike Machuga, who I do the Bonfire Sessions podcast with, our booklet is number one on Amazon, or number one new release on Amazon in theology.
Nice.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, and overall, I've had a cut in my categories, a couple books that have hit number one for I think the
Awesome.
most long. It was like 3 weeks. C.S. Lewis was like competing in one of the categories. I think his book that I was competing with came out like 80 years ago, and he's still like
Yeah, I
number one.
mean, who listens to
Just
that
give
guy?
me, give me 2 weeks, Lewis. Come on now.
Yeah. Wait till you're
Yeah,
dead, and you've got a legacy. Those books will be still like, people will be seeking out those first editions.
yeah. There you go.
That's how it works, right? You got to die first for people to like you.
That's
Because
how
C.S.
it goes,
Lewis,
right?
right? People would not like if C.S. Lewis was running around today saying the stuff he says in half of his books, we'd have like lynched the guy as a general Christian community as a whole. I mean, he's like throwing out all
Yeah,
sorts of ideas.
yeah. It's always interesting that both Lewis and Tolkien, I think, would like they're beloved in Christian circles, right? The
Mm-hmm.
Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the trilogy, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But if you if you listen to them and listen to their like mentor, George McDonald,
Yeah.
you would like absolutely like, no, we can't have these guys. They would definitely be, well, probably theoretically burned to the stake. We don't do that any longer, but they wouldn't be accepted in most evangelical circles.
No, you'd be getting tweets from John Piper, farewell, CS.
Yeah, it doesn't have.
He'd be a bit more witty and pithy with it, probably, but
yeah, doesn't have the same roll off the tongue as farewell, Rob Bell.
Oh man, wouldn't you loved C.S. Lewis on Twitter though, man? That would have been legit.
Yeah, right, totally.
So, talking of heretics, your podcast is called The Holy Heretics, right? Have I got that right?
No, you've got the wrong podcast, my friend.
Wait,
we're all about the alliteration. So we've got the Heretic Happy Hour. We've got
Heretic Happy Hour. That's right. Okay, sorry. Someone else was talking to me about this, but your podcast. Right? So I asked yesterday, 2 days ago, I don't know, and I said, look, if I could interview anyone on my podcast, who would you interview? And every person there's the three of you that run your podcast, right?
Yeah, there's three of us. Yeah.
Every one of you people were like, ask this person to come on. And multiple people asked for you to come on. So I'm fascinated. What makes you guys heretics? What does that look like for you?
Oh, I'm glad you asked, because that's the first question we ask all of our guests.
Okay.
We define, well, we use it tongue in cheek, right? So it's like the 2004 Boston Red Sox. They called themselves the Idiots because they had beards and their jerseys weren't put together like the Yankees were. So they embraced that moniker. We've kind of embraced that. We've been called, Keith, Jamal, and myself, and our producer, Ralph. He's more behind the scenes, so he hasn't been called it as much as we have been. But we've been called heretics, wolf in sheep's clothing, yada, 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 false teacher, false prophet, blah, blah, blah. So many times that it's kind of been like, well, why don't we use that and play it up a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
Because heretic, from what I understood back in the day, like back in biblical times, like it just meant someone who was divisive. So it wasn't necessarily so much about doctrine. Now heretic or heresy is kind of like you believe something that is counter to the common narrative or the masses, what they believe. Our show is modeled around peaceful disagreement, making fun of each other a little bit, poking fun at things, while also having like solid content and not taking ourselves too seriously. So that's kind of what we do. To me, heretic is just, everyone is a heretic, right? Everyone's someone else's heretic. You could think I'm a heretic. Someone thinks you a heretic. It's like hell,
right?
You're going to hell in this faith and this tradition. They're going to hell. All this sort of thing. So it's just become basically a pejorative that means you disagree, or I disagree with your theology. So we kind of poke fun at it. And then we've had everyone from like Orthodox folks like Jersak to Bart Ehrman, kind of an agnostic atheist scholar, to everyone in between, really. So we try to model that it's not what you believe necessarily, it's how we treat each other.
That's really good.
Yeah, that's I think the big thing on the draw to the show is that, especially like Jamal and Keith, they probably disagree the most on things.
Okay.
But we're fam at the end of the day,
Yeah. Is that, would you say that's a personality thing in you, that you naturally seek out the controversial view, the divisive view, the heretical position here or there, and go, oh, that there's something attractive about a different way of thinking? Or is that something that you have to kind of force yourself reluctantly to go into? Does that make sense? Because I know that for a lot of people, they don't like exposing themselves to different ideas. That isn't actually the norm for the vast majority of humans. We're wired for safety and not to seek out that which makes us uncertain.
Yeah, there's probably someone who like dorks out on Enneagram or Myers-Briggs or something that would say it's a personality type or something that you're more prone to do that. I've always been into that. I don't know why. I've always had that draw to be like, because to me it's like, it while not being safer, you're more apt to not be indoctrinated by view. You know what I mean? Like if you believe something that is so counter to what your whole group is telling you, well, it seems like, okay, then I can at least parse things out for myself as best I can. And we all are influenced by others, but I think we risk indoctrination when we go for the easy answer that our church is always believed or our family always believes.
Yeah.
And I think we run the risk of, not coming up with our answers ourselves, not thinking about these things all the way through.
Mm.
I've just always had the propensity to, like, I used to ask questions about like Satan when I was a little kid. I'm like, why can't Satan ask for forgiveness? Like, is it just written in the book that he can't, or, it's predestined that he has to, he has to burn forever in hell and he has to do this job? What if he actually did? It's like most questions 6-7-year-olds aren't asking. You know what I mean?
The good questions that like theologians go, crap.
Crap, we got to write dissertations about this,
Seriously, just give him a pen and paper and go, figure it out, man. I don't know. Give him some crayons and,
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny. Well, that's interesting because that's the same for me. That's how I'm wired. I've always just gone, oh, I don't know about that. So like, let me go and figure it out or explore it. But I do know that that's something a lot of people struggle with. And I think when people are going on their journeys of unraveling a lot of their faith, deconstructing, all these different languages that we put to this process of realizing that certain things we believe aren't necessarily true, some kind of like dive headfirst in and go, where can I find some more lies that I'm believing and just change and find different truths to grab onto? And other people are like dragged in, kicking and screaming and freaking out. And it's very hard for me to identify with a second person. I found it a lot easier as I've worked with people like that for years now. But I am 100% the first person. I am literally like, okay, like what book would terrify me? Give me that. Right. I want to go read it. I remember reading like Bart Ehrman or whatever and going like, holy crap, this is quite terrifying, but not going, how can I defend my belief and write this off? Mm-hmm. Rather going, well, okay, like what's the merit of what he's saying? What is this? Is it true? And I think that's a very unique perspective. Would you say the other guys on the podcast are similar, or are they quite keen to kind of explore their new ideas as well?
Well, I think, I don't think either of them were kicking and screaming to where they're at now. I think both were like me. They're in the first camp. They're like me. Like I did stuff with like Hitchens, like watching debates with Christians. Hitchens, and I'd be like, I got to know. I'm not really comfortable with the answer, maybe, but Hitchens seems to be winning this argument. I'm not an atheist any longer, but I was for some time. But I was just always like, I gotta know. I think Jamal's been big time like that, and I think Keith has been too. Yeah. So it's an interesting dynamic. Like, I try to empathize with the people in the second camp. Yeah, I try, but I've never experienced that. So it's, it's kind of hard. It's out of my wheelhouse.
You have to be careful not to send them on some sort of existential spiral just by mentioning something.
And sometimes I've gone, I've come so far that I forget where I've been, that sometimes I just say something loose and fast. And then I'm like, oh, I didn't realize, I forgot that in itself was controversial. To me, it's just a passing thought,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's really, really funny. How is that dynamic affected you? So you said you came from kind of a more evangelical background. Is that fair? Yeah.
Yeah, if you're familiar with like Left Behind, that kind of reaction.
Okay, nice. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, real nice.
Oh man, I used to tear through Left Behind. I don't think I ever finished that series, but I think that I bailed long before they finished. But I was well into those as a teenager. Like I think they kind of just came out around that time. And amazing. So that was your background. Very quite fundamental. Like we read in the Bible, like it says there's locusts with lion's head on them. So I guess some locusts with lion's head's going to show up. That's quite a rigid way of approaching God and spirituality. Was your tendency to seek out truth, your tendency to go, why can't Satan be forgiven? Was that problematic for you within that world? Like, or did it take quite a while for it to become problematic?
No, it was always problematic. I was terrified. I mean, I had like nightmares growing up, and I didn't want it to be true, but it's one of those things, like when you believe something and you don't know when you like formed that belief, like it was just put on you, like you didn't have an alternative. It's just the way it was. And I was kicking and screaming about that stuff because it didn't make sense. Like I was like, this cannot be the way, but it is. And I was just like horrified by it. Same thing with like homosexuality is a sin. I was just like, that makes no sense to me. Like why? What's the big deal? But it was just the way it was. The Bible was clear, of course. So yeah, I always had a hard time with all those things, even though it's not even that I believed they were true. They just were true.
Mm-hmm.
My belief didn't matter. Though that's the worldview.
Yeah.
It's not something it's not like you weigh some propositions and pick one. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. So what's been your journey from being within that world to running a podcast, self-ascribed heretic? You know, what are some of the landmarks that kind of kept pushing you forwards? Like, I'm assuming there's been some major moments, or was it just kind of like a very gradual, you know, sliding down the slippery slope that everyone warns you about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there were milestones. It was not a Damascus Road event, but the big one that really got me away from like what the Bible says is that I could not accept any longer the fact that God was violent. I just couldn't.
Yeah.
And so those were a lot of my big questions that I had for pastors and clergy and friends and things like that, and the answers were never satisfactory for me. And so that was a big one where I finally had to just like, Bill Burr has this bit where letting go of his religion is, he's like doing the bowling thing, and it's just you let the, or no, curling. He uses curling as an example, and
Okay.
you're sliding, and you finally just let the thing go, and it just like ever so gently just floats
Geeks
away. And
along.
that's how, yeah, that's how it was for me. It's just like I gotta just let this go. So the violence of God, the so-called violence of God, was a big one for me.
Yeah. How did you
Yeah.
come to navigate that then? How did you come to or I'm assuming you've come to navigate that and reconcile that on some level, the concept that so many Christians have that inherently violence is a part of God. It's how we connect to God. It's how we are made right with God. It's very much his way of dealing with the bad guys, whatever we term that, whether it's, you know, Canaanites or you know, the church down the road that believes a different doctrine. At some point, violence will come into their story. That's a really common narrative in today's Western church as a whole.
Yeah.
Maybe go as far as to say even the global church. That's a very common narrative. So, what were kind of some of your stepping stones in stepping out of that, and where are you now? Like, I'm assuming you found a place of God is not violent.
Yeah, I have. Rene Girard was a huge one for me.
Sure.
Just understanding how humans behave, how we write our mythologies, why we create these rituals, and just it's almost that like we learn what God is not like by learning why we say God is violent. So we learn that we're violent, which kind of takes it away from God. Not that we both can't be violent, but Rene Girard's mimetic theory helps me understand what God is not like by saying why do we project violence onto the gods no matter what our faith is. It seems like throughout history we've always had gods that demand sacrifice, that demand blood in order, you know, it's quid pro quo. It's there was no quid pro quo, no. There, you know, so why do we do this? Well, Rene Girard has really illuminated that for me, which is why I've written books on mimetic theory, and why so many people have written books on mimetic theory, whether anthropologists, sociologists, psychologists, archaeologists, theologians, philosophers, and it's become a really handy tool in the tool belt, and it's helped me understand why even the Bible has those violent depictions of God. Why there are the sacrificial depictions of God. The beautiful thing is there's a wrestling in the scripture. So now by taking it seriously, I can see why there's a wrestling there. Why do we get this kind of narrative and counter narrative interwoven throughout the Bible? You know, you have these, and we try to piecemeal it together, right, in the church, and you get this like very, very schizophrenic God that's, you know, it's almost like different personalities, and you say, well, no, it's just one personality with different ways of going. I mean, but it just gets wonky, you know?
Yeah. I mean, to me, that's fundamentally impossible to avoid if you're going to hold the concept of like, this thing was given by God exactly as he wanted it to be said, because he wants us to believe it at face value. You know, when you've got that concept of an inerrant, you know, whatever language you put around the scripture, you have to kind of juggle all these different opinions, right? So you have to make whoever the hell's writing, you know, the words of Moses down be exactly the same as what Jeremiah is saying when he's saying, well, I never told Moses to do that. You know, like, and so they go, crap, what do we do with this? And, you know, you've got translators putting in the word just to try and change the language, or you've got all sorts of things at play here, because we don't know how to reconcile that multiple people are involved in this story. Do you think it's possible, you know, so for me, I totally agree as far as I have a very mathematic understanding of reading scripture, seeing the evolution of cultures anthropologically, and see myself in the mirror. But for me, it was possible for me to embrace that because I was willing to let go of that understanding of the Bible. Do you see a possibility of fundamentals that are still gripping that Bible? Is there a possibility for them to let go of a violent God? Like, is that something that can even be done? Like, and this is something I constantly think of, because I'm desperately trying to help people step out of that concept of the Bible, so they can, you know, you have to let go of that concept of the Bible if you're going to be affirming of LGBTQ. You know, you have to let go of that if you're going to go, well, actually, probably God doesn't endorse infanticide and genocide and rape and all sorts of other things. You have to let go of that. Like, do you see, or to me, that's my conclusion. And if it is the conclusion, how do we even begin breaking down that narrative, that understanding of scripture?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would tend to guess that you do have to let go of that to some degree, because to me, it's creating something that the Bible itself was never meant to be. And so there's I don't think there's any value to holding the Bible like that. There's no value to saying that the scriptures are inerrant or infallible or whatever language we want to put around it, because that's like, to me, that's like how do I want to put it? You don't actually, it's like, are you even reading the Bible when you say that? Because if you actually read the Bible, you would see the internal dialogue. So you're going to miss the point of the Bible anyway, and then you are going to miss the inspiration of it, I think. How do you get people to let go of idols? That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when you put your faith in the Bible, you're really just putting your faith in your theory of inspiration of the Bible, or the way you interpret the Bible. See, what people need to understand is that there's no plain reading of the Bible. There is always, unless you figure out how to not be a subjective human.
Yeah.
I have not figured that out yet, and I've never met someone who has. You're always going to be interpreting it. So, gosh, I think people may need to have an existential crisis in order to, I don't know, in order to shed that view. They may need to have some sort of experience where this doesn't stand up anymore. You know, the John Pipers of the world who to always talk about all these horrible things being for the glory of God. Well, I mean, someone like him still sticks to, like, I think his wife got cancer or someone got cancer, and he was still using that argument. That argument doesn't work for a lot of people.
It can't hit much closer to home, right? I mean,
right.
Yeah.
So some people still stick with that view. Some people, when tragedy does strike, they can't hold on to it any longer. I'm not saying it should have to happen like that, where it's like this horrible tragedy.
Yeah.
But that seems to be how it does happen, where it's like, I believe that maybe God said to go slaughter the children, and then my nephew or niece got slaughtered in some horrific murder, and now I can't reconcile those two, because now it got real. Now it's not some abstract text from thousands and thousands of years ago. Now it hit close to home. And when I reread that Bible and it says that, and I'm like, oh, that happened to someone I knew that I loved. Woo! Good luck continuing to hold on to that. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It blows my mind. I sit and ponder these things for hours every day. I'm just like, how do you even begin to unravel these things? Because people, they're not willing I'll just even mention a single thing, like, oh, did you know that in this context, the writer of this epistle disagrees with the writer of that epistle, like you can see clearly black and white. One of these two is an opinion about God that isn't correct. Possibly both,
Possibly,
but they can't both be true. That it's just physically not possible. And so there is some level of humanity into this. And so you say something like that, just on one example, gosh, could be almost anything. Or you just say like, when Paul asked Timothy to go bring his cloak and his books with him when he comes to see him next, because he left them in Ephesus or whatever. He says, "Hey Timothy, can you bring them with me?" If Paul wrote Timothy, but that's better.
Right.
He said, "Oh, could you bring those with me, with you?" Like, I don't know if that's a mandate from God for us all to go on a pilgrimage to Ephesus to pick up Paul's coat and books and bring. It's like obviously there's some humanity in these texts, and you say stuff like that. And what's fascinating to me is how often, because the way I think just doesn't compute this way, but how often people say, well, if you're saying that's not true, or you say that Genesis isn't a literal account of the exact order of how things were made or how long it took, or whatever. If you say that's not true, how can we trust any of it? And, there's this thing of like, if I'm going to read this as poetry instead of a science book, I have to throw out Paul's letter or David's songs that he wrote. If I have to say that he probably didn't actually even kill Canaanites, actually, best guess, looking at archaeological records and looking at the cultures and the history and everything, probably not. And people go, whoa, so if you're saying the narrative in this isn't, are you just saying we have to, it feels like there's this massive block here as far as helping people even whittle at it, just touching on it just seems to put all the defenses up, you know what I mean? So
it's, well, and I think it's because people have it's like a house of cards, and their version of the Bible is like one of the base cards, and you pull the whole thing out and they're afraid that the whole thing's going to come tumbling down. It's our propensity to think dualistically about everything, and dualism has its place. If you told me how to get to your house and I had to make right and left turns, I need to know right and left turns. But to paint the entire biblical narrative or a worldview in those starkly black and white terms, I mean, why can't it be poetry? Why can't there be a literal truth that you can get from a non-literal reading? I think there's more. I get a lot of literal truth from reading Tolkien. I don't need to believe that Middle Earth actually exists in order to get like some deep truth from fictional characters.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you mentioned just a little bit ago that you were talking about how the Jews didn't approach the scripture like this. And this is something that fascinates me, is actually like this concept of reading the Bible this way is quite a phenomenon as well. Like, if you even look at Jews today, they're kind of like, well, what are you doing? And then you look historically at like, Jews in Jesus's time, Second Temple Judaism, they would be scratching their head at how we approach scripture. And so is that something, let's try to aside, I guess you could go down that bunny trail, but I'm really interested in, what did this look like for you? Because so for me, this is one of the absolutely, like you said, it's one of the base cards on the whole stack, on the house of cards. Was that the case for you? And how did you start kind of navigating scripture? Because you have to navigate scripture in order to allow yourself to move forward in a lot of these areas. Was that something that you found hard? Was it something you found quite easy to do?
I was never, like, even when I had beliefs that the Bible was whatever I said, I was never one that grasped onto it. I was lucky, like my parents, my mom and my stepdad we weren't raised fundamentalist, though we went to fundamentalist churches. So there was a little bit of a disconnect there. Okay. My mom and dad both were raised Catholic, then became Protestant later. My dad was a bit of a hippie, or my stepdad. So it wasn't just like it was passed on to him and then passed on to me. So there was always allowing us to be a little more kind of creative, a little less rigid, though from our church it was not. So it's kind of odd that we attended such a fundamentalist church. I was always asking these questions, like, I thought slavery was bad. Why is it cool that slaves are building the temple? And God's never like, hey, by the way, probably shouldn't do that. Like, well, you get answers from people, they treated their slaves really well, so that's why. And it's like, well, hold on, back up. They're still slaves. Like, that's not, could you imagine using the argument with black, well, these white folks were treating their black slaves really well. And you'd be like, you're racist. Like, why is it okay when we use it for the Bible? So I was always kind of, asking these questions, because I just was like, no, this can't be literally true. Like, there has to be some sort of human agency involved here in these texts, right?
Yeah.
My pastors were not as cool with that. I was more like, yeah, it's got to be. This is just the way human language works. You're not going to sit here and tell me that they got every jot and tittle from the Gospels historically accurate, because the 5 seconds of historical research, you're like, that's not the way they did things. This isn't modern journalism. These are stories, and people make points. They have points to make with these stories. So are we going to fudge the numbers a little bit? Yeah, we will fudge the numbers to make a point, because numbers in Judaism, like, they have meaning, right? So if I need it to be 40, or I need it to be 7, or I need it to be 12, I'm going to make it 12. Not because literally those numbers are there, like, because I need it, because it represents something, and there's a deeper truth behind there. And I even knew that, being in a fundamentalist church, I was like, no, they're doing something here to get us to think. And there's some sort of reason why this genealogy is different, because they're making a point,
Yeah.
You can't sit here and tell me that 2 genealogies. I know that, I know that Got Questions is going to piecemeal all this shit together, but it's like, no, let's just take it what it is. Like, they have a point to make.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we missed the point. Like, right. 7 out of 10 times you're going to utterly miss the point when you pick up a poem that's asking the questions: who is God? Why are we here? What's our nature? Can we trust God? Like, these big questions, and we pick it up, 21st century, this poem, and go, a scientific history book. Interesting. Right. Answering the questions of how did God build the earth, and how long did it take, and how long ago? All the questions that we're asking, clearly this ancient civilization, before they even were able to pen this stuff down, were asking the same questions, Yeah. And so because we've read it in like a totally different narrative, we miss the point, right? And I think that doesn't just happen in that context of maybe just how old the earth is or something like that, which I think in this day and age, you're going to find more and more, even fundamental Christians going, yeah, I mean, obviously it's not 10,000 years old.
Right.
So bit by bit, with certain things, there's this overwhelm of data. I guess that's maybe one thing that, I say it, as I'm saying it out loud, I'm looking at the news and I'm like, I don't know if an overwhelming amount of data will be enough for a lot of people.
But, no, come to the States, man.
I lived in the States for 4 years, and I spend a lot of time over there when I'm traveling and speaking. I know, but it's the same here. We have our fundamental rigidity as well, but I don't know. It's tough because my optimist in me, which is pretty small, I like to think, if there's enough data and enough like information, and people kind of evolve enough that they start to value that, they're gonna go, well, yeah, okay. But when Jesus told the parable of, like, I don't know, Lazarus, he wasn't actually saying this is what heaven and hell will be like.
Right.
That's not what it's about. It's about something deeper, more meaningful. It's not about is there fire? How far between heaven and hell? Can you feel the heat between? I just think we miss so much when we get bogged down in those the nitty gritty that probably most of the authors weren't really caring about. They were these aren't literary geniuses either, generally speaking, probably for the time. But yeah.
Well, and it kills the Bible. I mean, what's more likely that the writers of Genesis are talking about a scientific truth, or that they're arguing against an already existing creation myth? Oh, and you find out, there was already a Babylonian myth. Oh, there's a reason for the flood. Oh, it's that we're loud and noisy. Oh, okay, so the Hebrew people actually have a response to that. Doesn't that seem more likely than evolution's not true? And you're like, and it's also not 13.1 billion years old, because see here in the text, like, well, what's more likely though, that a group of people who are exiled into another land, who already must know these, the writers and the redactors and editors of Genesis must have known Enuma Elish, the Babylonian story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're probably going, no, I don't think that's how it went down. And they're responding to that and making an argument for God who doesn't, there's not a violent backstory of God's, right? Destroying each other and spilling blood and all, and that's how creation, no, God speaks and therefore creation happens. God breathes on, it's like, oh, this is much more interesting. This is much more alive. It would be like, I don't know. I mean, when we are anachronistic and we think that it's talking about science, it just becomes a dead book and it just becomes a punchline. It becomes a meme. It's like, it's silly.
Yeah. I think about stuff like this and I wonder, at what level do people need to be educated to engage with the Bible on these levels as well, though? So I think of original heroes of this story, Genesis is such a simple, easy example, but like someone just goes, in the beginning, and then they go, oh, I love this story. Enuma Elish, yeah, great. We're the gods, and the gods were at war with one another, battling for, and it's out of chaos they bring, life. And like, oh yeah, I love this story. And then it's like, in the beginning was God. Like, just what? Just that first sentence, you're like, what the hell's happening? You've ruined the story, and it's amazing and provocative. And yet we say in the beginning, and our only frame of reference is, oh, you're telling Genesis 1. I know this story. I know it goes to that. And then we get Adam and Eve, and then we get this, and then we get some Cain and Abel. And I can tell you right through from that to the Revelation, and that's our narrative for it. I just wonder how possible it is for the average person, to sit down and engage with these texts in this way, when it's not their cultural norm to know the context. Is that something that, you found that, I imagine as you've educated yourself, I'm assuming you didn't read Enuma Elish in school or, work through the Epic of Gilgamesh, so I'm assuming at some point you sat down and went, holy crap, there's other creative narratives and they're really similar. Like, yeah, and it's in that juxtaposition of these two stories that I actually find maybe what the key point is in the second one. That's not something the average person probably is going to just stumble upon or actively seek out 9 times out of 10, I think. And I think, again, is there an element of futility in seeking the scriptures? I hear me right on that, especially audience listening into this that are probably thinking, what the fuck are these guys talking about? You're freaking me out. I'm not saying there's a futility in the scriptures, but there's in a sense almost a futility in the scriptures of, if we don't know the context, what the hell are we going to bring out of this?
Well, there is, and I don't remember where this was years ago. I wrote an article about, if you want to take the Bible seriously, you have to read outside the Bible, because the truth of the matter is these are the contexts when it's written. If the writers of Genesis know the Enuma Elish story, and if they're making an argument against how creation really happened, wouldn't you want, if you want to know what the Bible is really saying, shouldn't you know the context that it's arguing against? It's like, I'm not of the belief that you have to learn Aramaic and Greek and Hebrew. I know very little Greek, even less Hebrew, and no Aramaic. It's helpful if that's your interest, it can only help you. But I think you do have to have a basic sense of what's going on in the world if you want to take the Bible seriously. If what's going on in the world when these things are written, why? What? Let's go to Jesus when he says, God blesses not just the righteous, but he blesses the wicked as well. He sends rain on the just and the unjust. Okay, cool. That sounds great. Why is that important? Because there was a belief, and go to Deuteronomy 28, and this transcends the Bible. All people really believe this. Yeah. God blesses the righteous and curses the wicked. God sends rain to the righteous and gives dust to the wicked. Oh, okay, cool. Well, why is this important? Well, crops and things like that. Well, why would God do that? Well, we're not making sacrifices. Well, so we got to go outside. Why is sacrifice such a big deal in the Bible? Why is there so much of this? How do we understand it? Well, how do we understand Abraham and Isaac? Why is that such a big story? Well, it was a test and and it's a foreshadowing. And it's like, okay, but isn't it actually like more impactful when you're like, no, sacrificing your first son was just the assumption. That is the norm. End of story. No questions asked. The shocking part of the story is not that Abraham goes to kill Isaac. That should not shock us. The shocking part of the story is that he doesn't. Because if we put ourselves in that world, we go, no, you have to kill him. You have to.
Yeah.
The gods are going to be angry if you don't. The fact that he doesn't, and there's some Jewish scholars who say he actually did, and they kind of, but whatever. I mean, I'll let the scholars debate but I think the takeaway is that, we're supposed to get from it is that he doesn't go, his hand is stayed, like, whoa, this God is way different than the other gods. Well, how do we know that? Well, we need to understand what's going on in the ancient Near East. We need to understand what's going on in the Bronze Age. Why were these people thinking in the way that they thought? You can use 100 different examples. When we talk about the Logos, in the beginning was the Logos, we translate it to word. What does that mean? Well, there's a whole Greek philosophical background.
Yeah.
Logos is the structure and principle of reality. Heraclitus, hundreds of years before Jesus, said, war is king. War is the Logos. Strife is the Logos. Violence is the Logos. That's what structures the world. Well, okay, well, the writer of John's Gospel is like, no, in the beginning was the Logos. The Logos was with God. The Logos was God. Or as Brad Jersak says, like, the word of God, so how's he put it? I'm going to butcher the quote, but it's not a book. It's a person at 18 who grew a beard. It's like that. We need, yeah, it's great. It's not exactly that, but so we have to have all these contexts, I think, to really understand what's being said. I'm a firm believer of that. And plus we should be curious though. Shouldn't we be curious? I know it's not the cultural norm, but damn it, we need to be more curious about things.
Well, I mean, this is the primary role of one of the primary roles of the Holy Spirit, right? Is to lead us into truth. We should be people that are deeply driven by being led into truth. And if you are going to have to be led into truth 3.5 years after following Jesus day in, day out, it suggests you don't know everything, even after hanging out with him for 3.5 years. I love that aspect of Jesus saying, like, hey, look, there's some stuff I wish I could have told you, but you're not ready. And I don't necessarily even think that's talking about Peter, John, James. I think that's talking about humanity as a greater consciousness, as a species. We're just, it's still 2,000 years prior to where we're at today. They're just not ready for the message on, hey, maybe slavery, not a good idea. Maybe not the let's be nice to our slaves message, and maybe just let's not have slaves. New idea, but you're not ready for that. So Jesus, at least be good to your slaves, Right. It's fascinating. So I wonder, do you have thoughts on why? This fascinates me so much that I kind of understand that, the average Joe that's going to work 9 days, Jesus, 5 days a week, 9 to 5, they've got a wife and kids, they've got busy life. They don't have time to sit and do deep historical research. And I'm not even going to begin to like judge anyone for like not having the time. This is my job. I have the time to do it. I still don't freaking spend enough time doing it, So I get it. And yet for people that are, educated as pastors, especially those that are educated to become pastors, I think it's another kettle of fish when you're just you grow up into it or something. You're a pastor's kid and you just inherit the seat or whatever nepotism is called today. But for those that are educated, they go to a seminary, they go to a Bible college, they go to a university. A lot of them are exposed to this concept, even if they're not actually shown maybe the fallout of that. I know a lot of Bible colleges are very like, just teach this stuff, just repeat after me and you'll be fine. But generally speaking, they're at least told, hey, when you study the scripture to give a message on Sunday, look at the culture. Just maybe have a glance, just so you can see what's the context of this passage. What do you think's holding back a good portion of Christianity from doing that, at that level, as leaders, as pastors? Why do you think we don't do this more? Because I don't hear it. When I grew up in church, I didn't hear that conversation. Might hear an occasional like, oh, there's an eye of the needle gate at Jerusalem, which ends up being bullshit anyway, right? Occasionally you'd hear like a little thing, but generally this wasn't practiced in my kind of circles, it seemed. Do you have thoughts on why that is? Is there an undergirding kind of element behind that, do you think?
Oh man, yeah, I also didn't get any of that stuff either. I didn't get those contextual nuggets. I think because when we add context into it, it takes away our level of certainty. And I think things become a little bit muddy, and we have to be okay with that. And most people are not. I know pastors who are great, who are okay with saying, like, I don't know what this passage necessarily means. I can give you ideas, or a parable, especially, like, well, this parable means that. It's like, that's not how parables work. It can mean a lot of things. We have to draw infinite meaning out of them. That's why they're great teaching tools. I think a lot of pastors and teachers and Christians are afraid of losing their sense of certainty. And I think contextualizing it and problematizing texts, and I think all those things that, the historical critical method might help with, understand, like the Bart Ehrmans, the way they approach historical texts, like we would approach hopefully any historical text. We end up being agnostic in a lot of ways. And I don't mean agnostic in terms of like what we think, oh, I don't know if there's a God, there's not evidence, but agnostic, or we hold our beliefs loosely. And that's really uncomfortable for people. We want to grip them, because then we have our teddy bear and we feel warm at night. We're safe and secure. And holding things loosely, we're afraid that we're going to break them. But I mean, I understand why I think that's maybe one aspect of why that happens. And I get it. Yeah. But it's just not helpful. And to your other point earlier about like, people don't have time for this. They really don't. They work their 9 to 5. They do all that. And then I would say, well, then don't feel like you have to be so certain about all these things. Like I also don't have time or desire to study auto mechanic stuff, but I'm not going to hold like,
you're not going to offer to fix my car.
No. And I might be able to, I've got the wisdom to say, take it to a guy, and say it to someone else. Like, I mean, if you don't study any of it and you simply just read I don't mean to sound arrogant, but I mean, pardon me if I don't really necessarily care what your opinion is, just like you wouldn't care what my opinion. My wife does not really care my opinion on how to be an RN. Like, I have no advice to give. As a social worker, I'll talk to you about it. Talk to you about how you feel. But I'm not going to tell you how to, well, honey, you might want to, if you want to get an IV, and maybe you should consider, like, she'd look at me like,
you might get an IV in the neck doing that.
I might.
But it fascinates me because there's a principle. I can't remember what the principle is called. But the less educated we are on a matter, the more certain we tend to feel about it.
That's kind of like is it Dunning-Kruger?
Is it Dunning-Kruger?
Like
I wanted to say that, and I was like, I'm actually not entirely sure. And it's not across the board. It works in every area, but it's certainly in a lot of areas. Generally speaking, it does feel that the areas I have been most certain in my life have generally been the areas I haven't looked too closely. It's that duality. Duality is really easy when you take a step back. But when you kind of like get into the thick of it and you look at it and you're like, actually, this is a bit messy. There's a lot of mixture in the midst of these two choices. And actually, there's a lot of stuff that kind of crosses the bounds of both sides. And I'm not sure about this. And you find that the more you educate yourself, the less certain you are. And I do wonder about stuff like that. And I think this is indicative of where we are today, like you talking about, you wouldn't have an opinion on an RN, well, people do, right? I mean, I open my Facebook and I'm reading, did you know that I'm friends on Facebook? I'm really selective. I have like about 250 friends, 300 friends. I'm really proud of, like, I don't add people on my personal account. And I'm like, no, I want to see my personal friends on this. I don't want to see random people. But nonetheless, did you know of the 250 people I'm friends with, I would say about 60 of them are qualified epidemiologists. going
That's
by their
amazing.
posts.
Right.
They suddenly know everything and anything about COVID viruses and SARS and how viruses mutate and all these different things. And not only that, they're experts in techno-communication. They understand how 5G affects the human body. And even though that the scientists haven't yet figured that out fully, they know exactly how it works and how it like creates some virus, and I'm fascinated by it because in the grand scheme of things, I don't mean to be offensive. I really don't. It's not an ignorance of being stupid or anything like that, but these people are grandly ignorant of the actual topic. They're not trained experts. They're not doctors. They're not epidemiologists. They're not, experts in magnetic radio frequencies or things like that. And I think this is an epidemic in and of its own right. And I think we're seeing it more today, but I don't know if this has always been or not. But do you have thoughts on how we kind of, as a society, start tackling these kind of concepts? Because I don't know if people are fully able to engage with that off the bat. I don't know if people are fully able to understand I'm not an expert because I read a Facebook post or I read this one article from this one, news feed that I only watch or, do you know what I mean? Because I feel like this is not just it's not just a theological issue. You can see this spiraling out in all kinds of different areas, and there's overlap, of course.
I don't know. That's a tough one because it seems like we're getting more to that place. And I know social media is great for a lot of things. I think it's kind of exacerbated what's already there. Like, it's just now everyone has a platform to spew nonsense. And I don't know what the solution is to that. I honestly, for me, everything's just a whittling away. Like you get one person to become more nuanced in their thinking, and that's what you just got to plug away and not the masses are not, most people are not going to change quickly. No. And to some degree, that's okay. Now it is dangerous because like you said, everyone's an epidemiologist and no one has credentials, but they talk the most about it. You don't see my wife who would know way more about it and she's not an epidemiologist, but
no.
You don't see the RNs necessarily posting every 5 seconds. They're just, because
they're busy in the freaking hospital saving lives, right?
Exactly. So it on one hand, like I want to give people grace and where people are at, that's okay. On the other hand, like I definitely think we need to change how we go about things. I'm honestly not that interested in talking to the people who already know everything. And that's just me. Like I guess my solution is I've given up. No, I talk to the people who it's obvious that they want to have a conversation.
You pick your battles, right?
Yeah.
See, I try and do that, but I'm really bad at figuring out who's who, because I think there's this fine line where there's obvious people that are very open, have an open personality, ask lots of great questions, and are obviously seeking an alternate path. But I think there's also there's the person that presents. There's two people that present very similar to me, and they both present quite angry, quite aggressive, very, they've got a list of scriptures. And yet one is genuinely just like, you just poked the hornet's nest and it is going to sting you like crazy till you die. That's the one person. And that's the kind of person you're like, you're not going to change this guy's opinion. Like, let them be. Just be like, oh man, you're right. Well done. Fantastic. I'll see you later. But there's another person that presents similarly, but I think they're in a place of the poking of the hornet's nest is because they're sensitive enough that it's causing them some internal angst and some frustration, and actually a little bit of love, a little bit of care, a little bit of hand holding. And I think these are the people that you bring, these are the people that you move forward. Like, how do you go about trying to figure out where people are at? Like, do you have conversations with people like that? Or do you kind of go, they're not quite there yet either. I'm not going to go there yet. Or is that something that you try and engage with? Because I think about this a lot of like, I don't like talking to people. I'm an introvert. I would rather just sit on my own and read books. But for whatever reason, I really kind of also want to help people. So I end up thinking about these things a lot.
I don't go out of my way to like actually talk to people. I engage with people on Facebook a little bit. I post things, and I do get into dialogues with people, but not as much as I used to. I figured that there's like an old adage and I'm not saying I'm the master and the student needs to seek me, but when you've done, like, it's one of the reasons, like, I've written so much and created so many podcasts. It's like, I feel like if people are interested in answering the questions that they're asking, that's why I wrote Heretic, one of my books. I picked 10 questions that I heard every day almost, and I answered them. And so it's like, I don't want to always just be like, read my book. But to some degree, I do want to be like, read my book, because that's why I wrote it. So you're literally asking the question in almost verbatim, you know, how I presented it in books. So, and I am an introvert, so it's like, I want to read and I want to write and I want to talk to some people and then go be by myself for a while, because it zaps my energy.
It's exhausting. It is.
It's very exhausting. Yeah. And I like talking to people. That's the common misconception about introverts. I like being social.
Yeah, me too. I've
just I haven't filled the gas tank in a while. So it's like, it's like, as an extrovert, you get your energy from being with people. For me, it zaps it. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that's the way it is. Like, I got to go hang out in the garden or something, go plant some plants or whatever I need to do.
I hear you, man. I've got a friend, Martin. He'll go into fundamental Facebook groups and be like, hey guys, I'm exploring this idea of like ultimate reconciliation. What do you think? Here's 28 Bible verses to back. And I'm like, Jesus, this guy, but he's like, he's extra. He just loves it. He just loves the discussions. He loves having these like intense conversations. And you know what? He sees like some people kind of going, oh dude, you got some points here. But I'm like, dude, I would be exhausted just thinking about how I would even frame, you know, I don't want to go there. But it's really interesting because I see that a lot. I see that a lot. People asking the same questions. You can give them a resource and go, look, Instagram DM. Like, if you're expecting this to be better than the hour resource I prepared for you on this one topic that you can just listen to, you're delusional. You know, that will be better. Just go listen to that. And it does feel like maybe if they're not willing to, maybe they're not actually genuinely seeking, genuinely asking questions. So you maybe have a good point. It's maybe something.
And honestly, like I mean, this is not just me. It's not to say like my time is not worth it, but all of our time is not worth it, because we can only spend, if I spend 2 hours talking to someone I don't know on Facebook about something they're disagreeing with me, that's fine if that's how I want to spend my time. But most of us have families. I have a kid. Like, I want to see them too, and I already don't get to see them enough. You know, a little more than we'd like to right now, obviously. But no, I'm kidding. But you know, generally speaking, you know, my wife gets home, I'm doing something. You know, we've been homeschooling, then we come transition to this, and then we got something else to do. It's like, you know, and you want to do the same thing. I guarantee, Mr. Angry Facebook person. I guarantee you have family too that you want to go hang out with, and you know, sometimes it's just like, hey, we only have so much energy. There's studies that show that we can only really get to know a handful of people. I don't know what the number is. I forget. But it's not many. Like, we can who we truly have a relationship with. So sometimes, it is. It's back to picking your battles. If that's what you want to do and you're amped on it, like your friend, like if you like that, you might help some people. Because often when we debate, it's not the person we're debating, it's the people watching, right? That's how it goes. And
that's a huge thing I see as well. People commenting saying, "Oh, I love the way you talk to that person." It's insane, or you know, just like that might be worth something here or there. But my friend, honestly, I crack up. I just die every time because it'll pop up on my newsfeed every and again. It's like this person in this group, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to look at that group. Just the name of that group is like triggered about 18 different responses in me, and none of them are healthy.
9-point Calvinist group? Nah, I'm good.
Exactly. Like, how on earth? Like, you've doubled the amount of points you could find here. Oh, that's so funny. So when you guys are looking at like people that you have on your podcast, do you look for people that you actively disagree with here or there, or are you mostly going, oh, I just love what this guy has to say? I'm really intrigued by that component, because you're talking about how you like to have these kind of disagreements as part of like your concept of heretics, and you know, you have the heretic that who you're going to have on that has this different position. Is that something that generally you see as it's a different position to yourselves, you know, your group of you, Keith, Jamal, or is it more that you see it as something that's different to conventional Christianity as a whole? Does that make sense?
A bit of both. But it has to be within like the ethos of the show. Like, I honestly, like, I'd love to get Piper or MacArthur or something like that. I think it'd be fantastic.
Dude, I would have my popcorn for that.
Yeah, it'd be great. That would be. We had Richard Rohr and David Bentley Hart, and those were some of our biggest numbers. But I think someone like Piper MacArthur would like. I mean, it would be great publicity. But
Yeah.
I don't think that people like that would really want to come on the show, first of all. So we do have to have, but our ethos is to get people like, so we've had like David Bentley Hart, Brad Jerzak, who are Eastern Orthodox, we have Bart Ehrman, who is, he's Bart Ehrman, Richard Rohr's, Nadia. So we have people, he's Franciscan, she's Lutheran. We've had, activists, musicians, Ken Sru from Thrice, who we've had more conservative people, we've had LGBT people. So we kind of try to do both, like people that we tend to disagree with, or I can't even say we because we disagree with each other.
Sure.
But who still are cool with the disagreements themselves. Yeah. As much as I'd love to get some hardcore, Mark Driscoll would be fantastic.
Oh my God.
I honestly don't think they would. I don't think they would appreciate.
That's it.
As much.
Or be able to have the conversation. It's like do you ever have you ever seen the Rob Bell conversations from when he first released Love Wins? He went on all sorts of like radio broadcasts and news shows and things like that. And in some of them, they literally would pit them up against some sort of fundamental kind of very whatever that position is, very black and white dualistic Christianity, and they put them both up on the table and go, oh, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? Yeah. And you're looking at Rob and you're just like, this is like, it's like a duck talking to a tree. Like, do you know what I mean? Like we're expecting like this to be a conversation. It's never going to be a conversation. These are two different languages, and so it's just not possible. So I guess there is that kind of, you've got to find something in the window. Yeah, I found that it's almost like quantum questioning. Like you'll be here, and then like a particle, all of a sudden you're here, and that's what I feel like. Unless you understand where I'm coming from, it's going to be, well, what about this? Well, what about that? Well, what about, and they'll be all over. And so it's like you're like in and out of existence, like an atom. No, it's so it's like, well, I thought we were just talking about the fact that the Bible doesn't condemn homosexuality, and now all of a sudden we're talking about hell and Lazarus, and now all of a sudden we're talking about Revelation, and now all of a sudden we're talking about Genesis. Yeah. It's like hold on, and so I found that to be the case for a lot of people that think black and white, like hardcore. This is it, Westminster Confession of Faith. That's the end all be all. Like when you're hard into that camp, there are outliers, of course. Most people, however, like literally can't have a conversation. Yeah. That the same conversation we're having. I mean, the people who just quote Bible verses. I was having a discussion with someone who ended up blocking me on Facebook. Whatever, that's fine. And because she didn't understand that just quoting a Bible verse is not a conversation. Like that's. Do you understand? Like if you're talking to me face to face and you were just literally quoting a Bible verse, like that's not how we communicate. She cannot understand. Like you don't allow conversation on the face. I'm like, yes, I do. That is not a conversation. However, like we can talk about the Bible verse, but you can't just quote it and like you did a mic drop. Like that doesn't work. You're friends with Michael Harden, aren't you, on Facebook?
Yeah, he was actually my theological mentor.
Oh, awesome. Wonderful. It comes out in your writing and stuff. So I love Michael. He taught me 3 times a week for over a year and a half. He taught me Greek. And so great. Love the guy, but I love his Facebook rules. They are like the funniest. But one of them really is funny. If you just quote a Bible passage with no context, you are immediately gone. Just done. It's like scorched earth, kind of like it's just like I thought that guy posted. No, they aren't even on Facebook anymore. They're just gone.
They're gone. They don't exist.
And I'm just like, oh man, I so but what's fascinating about it, what makes it fascinating, because I look at that and I'm like, I'm a bleeding heart liberal, soft, gentle, like, oh, I want to have a conversation with you, even if you're just going to quote. I want to try and help you understand, and I pay all the prices for that terrible life choice. But I look on that and I look at Michael Singh and I'm like, oh, that feels really harsh. But then you look at the quality of the conversations that happen on his page, and I know he posts a lot less about theology and spirituality these days. He did days gone by, but the quality of the conversations used to be so high that it does fascinate me. It really fascinates me how quickly people go, I got to up my game. Because if I'm just going to quote a Bible verse, which we kind of all know what I'm saying, but I'm going to quote, just that, it's immoral for a man to lie with a man. It's like, well, we all know you're saying, I don't like homosexuals. I think they're wrong. I think they're evil, or whatever. But I can't do that anymore. So I've got to post this quote, which Michael wouldn't even mind if he posts a quote, but he's like, okay, now what have I got to say? I've got to say, well, this is what I think, and this is why I feel like it's valid, and I have to quote it in its context. His rules are like, you have to quote it in context, you have to exegete the text, and it's amazing how much more of a conversation, right? It becomes a conversation. Yeah. Because if someone did in your presence, just one-on-one, face-to-face, go, here's a Bible verse, and just hit you with it, you would probably go, okay, but what's your point? What were you saying? Why do you read it that way? How do you read it that way? That doesn't really happen on Facebook,
No, it doesn't. No, unfortunately, we do so much on social media that we wouldn't do face to face, though.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's really true. So how does that work out? I'm just intrigued by, you've got a fairly strong presence as far as online, you've got these books, you've got all these podcasts and stuff like that. Does that affect how you interact with Christians day to day in your own life? Or are you not really in that world anymore? Have you kind of like stepped out of like church, evangelicalism, all these different things? Are they things that are part of your life anymore? Or what does your life look like day in, day out, navigating having a faith?
No, I don't like I'm not a part of a congregation or anything like that. I have a small group of friends who all, though we're in different places, tolerate each other's views that might be different. It's definitely like-minded in that way. As far as like my faith goes, like I just try to do what I think churches are supposed to be doing. I'm trying to work with people who are on the fringes of society. I run a food program. That's one of my side hustles. So we glean food from farmers markets and give it to people. I'm just trying to do that without necessarily. My wife and I have no interest in being a part of a congregation.
Right.
We used to attend a UCC and I liked it. But I think we were the youngest by maybe 30 years. So my daughter was like, this is kind of rough. I mean, I have no problem. And it's not like I can't hang out with old people. It's just one of those things well, I mean, they were great, but at the same time, it's not something I want to do on a weekly basis. But I don't really have any of that sort of church life. I have no interest in being a part of a congregation necessarily.
Yeah. Is your wife in a very similar place then theologically and spiritually, or is that something, because I know for a lot of people these kind of journeys don't tend to go hand in hand, certainly not initially. And so what was that like for you, in your relationship more close to home with your wife, or even maybe with your family? Might be an interesting facet as well, I guess.
That's the more interesting route.
Okay.
My wife and I I've done more of the theological grunt work. She's a professional in the medical field. So it hasn't been, and it hasn't really been she's not dug into Douglas Campbell's 1,200 page book on Paul. And, she's read Rachel Held Evans and she's read a couple of my books, and she likes Rob Bell and things like that. So it's just not her interest per se.
Yeah. To be fair, Campbell could have wrote that easier. I mean, that's a rough book.
It's tough sledding, man. I mean, if I got 5% of what the hell he was talking about.
I flicked through a lot.
Yeah.
All right, Campbell, I kind of got you at this point. Can we?
Where's the cliff notes? All right. Paul's laying out an argument. That's not really what Paul believed. Man,
it was unbelievable.
All he had to say was this is Paul's basically Colbert Report. It's a diatribe. Oh, all right, cool. I can get down with that.
I want to have him on the podcast and just make him kind of summarize Deliverance of God in just 2 hours, right? Give me.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I don't mean to. I just
no, I
that book is a freaking hilarious.
I think
it's amazing. I mean, it's one of the most foundational shifts within the church. I think we'll be looking back 50 years from now and going, holy crap, that J.L. Martin's Galatians. I mean, these are probably the cornerstones of what theology will look like in 20, 30 years, if not already starting to be. But your wife's not into that. It's not her kind of her jam. She doesn't get off a hard 12-hour, 15-hour shift of nursing and go, oh, I know some Douglas.
I need to dig into some prosopopia. Yeah, I need to get on that now. But with her family, it was, it was a little bit, it was rough sledding too, in a different way. Her grandfather was the pastor, longtime pastor at the church we went to. Very fundamentalist, very offended that I changed. They took it very personally. Because I was very involved in the church. I did worship. I was on many worship teams because I can at least play decently, like 4 instruments. So I was heavily involved in the music there and Bible studies, and everyone knew me. And then all of a sudden, like, oh, Matt went off the deep end. And it was quite. And I cuss and I have tattoos and I look the way I do, and I'm pretty open about ideas, and like had no problem asking them. When I took to Facebook asking questions, it was taken very personally.
Wow.
And it was interesting. I had a discussion with my brother about why, and he was like, it was very telling. It was, well, you have questioned who they are as a person, or who we are as a person. And I was thinking, wow, I see how that's taken. But man, we are not our beliefs. We are much more than that. So, but people have identity with their beliefs, which is why it was taken very personally. And I've abandoned the family. I've abandoned these crucial tenets of the faith, and I've got a axe to grind with them personally. And it was like, man, I really wish that didn't happen. You know what I mean? Like, it was never personal. It was about me, about my existential angst, and holy shit, like, if this isn't true, if I, if hell's not an eternal furnace, like, I've been lied to, and what is going on? Is there a God? Is there even a God?
It's hard when you identify so strongly with those beliefs, because we say, like, you're not your beliefs, but I mean, that's kind of the Protestant foundation stone, is you kind of are your beliefs, right? Or existentially, eternally, you are your beliefs, because if you don't have the right beliefs, you are not. Well, actually, that's probably more annihilationist as it is, but like, it's we are wrapped up in these beliefs. Everything we are, everything we believe exists, the universe, God, all of it is just so wrapped up in this core kind of foundational set of beliefs. And when you start questioning that, it does make sense. It makes sense why people get upset and angry, and they're terrified, they're scared. But it doesn't make it more less painful. It still hurts when people get scared and they do lash out and they do find ways where they can't accept anymore.
And it is, and I get, like, they are. I'm not saying people are bad people for doing that, because I think they are truly, like, I think they are truly worried for you, because
absolutely,
you know the equation, and this person doesn't fit in the equation any longer.
You're going to hell, right? They're genuinely scared. You're going to hell, and you're taking, my daughter, my granddaughter with you.
Exactly.
That's a terrifying thought, and we don't want either of you to burn. It makes sense. It makes sense, and I don't think anyone is inherently. None of their motivations are bad in that. They're good, reasonable motivations, but
it almost becomes a fight or flight response. It's very, it's fear based. And not just like they're living in, they're not trying to scare you. They're not trying to put fear into you. Maybe a little bit, but they're truly are afraid for you, and angry that my daughter is at risk because I'm not raising her right in the church and all this. And we don't teach that being gay is bad. We don't teach that there's a hell that you're going to go to forever. We don't teach that you have to pray the sinner's prayer and magically you get to go to heaven. Like, we don't, we don't do that. So
it's interesting that you said, so you're quite open, and you're quite, reasonably open with where you're at, who you are, within this church community on some level. I'm sure you probably stepped on eggshells occasionally, to kind of, be generous and loving to the people that weren't ready to hear a lot of things. And yet probably people did know on some level, Matthew's a bit maybe don't ask too many questions because he'll come out with some corkers. But there was a significant shift by the sound of it when you started to say things online. What am I picking up on that correctly? Like, so.
Yeah, because I was not even on Facebook until I started like writing my first book and I got published writing articles. Okay. And then I started really going like, I had a little podcast with a friend. And then I started like, okay, if I'm going to do these things, I probably should be on social media because you kind of have to be in some way, unless you want to just write books for yourself. So then it was like, okay, I'm going to ask these questions and openly process what I'm doing. That's going to be kind of part of my thing, what I write about, so that's when the questions became more pointed rather than, well, at Bible study, I might say, are we sure that like, it's cool to have slaves and why wasn't it really that's what really happened? And God was okay. I mean, God really did tell them to go slaughter. I mean, are we sure that God told them to slaughter all the animals? Like and the kids? Then it would be like, then it goes from like kind of those, are we sure? To like, I got really like, there's no, I mean, it's morally atrocious to do this. How could God do that? So it becomes a little more pointed and then everyone sees it.
So is it maybe more that you were sharing an opinion as opposed to just questioning the opinion of the day? It was literally, it wasn't just that this thing was like, is that fair? It was more like, hey, there's another thing that I think is better. Did you think that's kind of the main underlying kind of difference that caused the tension?
Probably, yeah.
Possibilities basically for people to kind of explore.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
It became a lot more directed. It became a lot more focused. And, there is a certain level of anger that when you feel like your whole world is falling apart now in terms of what you believe in, and so you don't know what the hell's going on. There is it's not even that you're angry all the time, because I definitely wouldn't say that, but it comes off as that because you're just like, and sometimes people hear like if I cuss and, oh, why are you angry? It's like, well, no, I just talk that way. It might come across that. I'm just like, what the hell is going on with this? Yeah. People be, oh, he's angry. It's like a little bit, maybe, sometimes, but sometimes it's just really direct and straight to the point and
getting to the point and pointing out, highlighting things. Kirsten has. I mean, I'm Scottish, so I mean, I restrain myself at all times, and I still swear probably a couple of times an hour, a minute. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's really interesting, that dynamic of, I think there's something really painful to go through, that process of asking questions, realizing that certain things you've believed for a long time aren't necessarily true. You're maybe still trying to figure out what you do believe, maybe. And then when you do find these different options, you go, this is so much better. You can't help but go, guys, look,
right.
Yeah. And no one's asked this question yet, but you're like, hey, everyone, look over here. And that's not. Sorry.
That's what happened with me with universalism. When I first heard of universal reconciliation, I was like, guys, oh my God, this is amazing. Isn't this really cool? And it was like, nope. Not
everyone comes running at you with a pitchfork.
I was like, oh, I didn't realize this would be so horrible.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like I'm advocating like bestiality or something. Like, holy shit. Like I did not mean
it's the worst thing you could possibly touch.
I could not. Right. I could not have imagined the amount of like, whoa. Sorry, my bad. Didn't realize.
Yeah, there's so many dynamics in that, and I feel like most people that are going through that process are quite quickly labeled in a box that we can understand, and quickly, probably on as best we can, kind of discredit. Say, oh, okay, don't worry about Matthew. He's kind of backslidden, or he fell down a slippery slope, or he's a heretic, or whatever. He's possessed. We could move a whole range of things, I'm sure, but there is an element of, as quickly as possible, how do we put you in a box we understand, but also how do we almost, on some level, it's a dehumanization. It's a scapegoating mechanism, really, isn't it? I mean, it's mimesis, really. It's like, how do we get you as a scapegoat that we can all feel good, that we can all then kind of feel together and safe and good, and look at us, we offered up this terrible heretic to God. And how did you cope with that element of like people And maybe I'm over assuming what happened to you. I'm probably relying on my own anecdotal kind of experiences and talking with different people. But was there an element of scapegoating that you experienced? And is that fair? How did you navigate that? Just from a personal level, right? You can intellectually go, this is a scapegoating mechanism, and this is natural, and anthropologically, this happens to everyone. But, I'm not getting burned at the stake, but it's still shit, right?
Yeah, it was tough. It was really rocky. I coped with it the best I could. My wife and I luckily were like really strong with each other. Like we didn't start getting at each other's necks because of it. We just like put our head down and went for it. Cause I have the propensity to intellectualize things. So I was seeing people who otherwise would not get along. Like once Matt was the problem, they would get along and they'd come to each other's defenses. And it was just like, whoa, you guys aren't doing wonders
for church unity, right?
Yeah. I'm like, wow, this Gerard stuff is really true. And I'm seeing it. But then, you're not just talking about the scapegoating mechanism and mimesis, you're actually seeing it, and you happen to be playing that role. And see, the thing about the scapegoat, it's not to say the scapegoat's innocent necessarily. Like, I definitely, we all play our part in family dynamics and things that don't go so well. But you definitely see, but it just becomes one of those things where it sounds cliche, just like day at a time. Like, I didn't like, necessarily I never got like therapy or counselor. I talked to my best, I guess I technically did talk to my best friend a lot about it, Mike Machuga. That's what our bonfire sessions used to be for 5 years. We didn't record, we just sat once a week and talked. That was a big coping mechanism for me. It's just one of those things you had to put your head down and go for it. And sometimes you were angry and bitter and sad and heartbroken, and it's one of those things you ride through, though, I guess.
Yeah. Wow, that sounds like quite a ride. So tell me some stuff about, you've written 6 books. Like, what have you kind of written? Where can people kind of like engage with your works?
The work specifically, if you go to allsetfree.com, that's my website. It's the title of my first book that I published with Whippenstock. It was as scholarly, and From the Blood of Abel. Those 2 books are as scholarly as I ever want to go. Okay. So it's more like the All Set Free. I was putting forth a defense for universal reconciliation. Okay. I'm totally an unabashed universalist. Thomas Talbot was one of my biggest heroes ever. So that's the name of the site. That's the name of my first book. That's where you can get all my books. I got a bunch of essays. I'm doing a blog thing right now where I'm going through the lectionary, the Revised Common Lectionary, and I'm commenting on each gospel passage. So I do that there. Got a store. I sell T-shirts and stuff, and that's where you can link to the podcast as well.
Dude, you've got merch. Nice.
I've got merch, man. We got swag.
That's next level.
Yeah. It's one of those things like, unless you're paying for advertisements, it's
I hear you.
That's what even sharing podcast links. Facebook does not like you going to external links unless you pay for advertisement. And so, I've sold a handful of things. Yeah, but it's fun. I'm doing a ton of shit as much as I can. I like creating content. I think we as human beings are creative. We're meant to be creative. We're meant to create something.
That's awesome.
And so, I've got a lot of stuff I've created on my website, and I'm mainly on Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff.
Okay, cool. People can find you on there, and you're not going to chat to them, all right?
No, I don't want to talk to people.
But they can check you out. So,
Facebook, I'll chat with people.
Facebook and Instagram. What are your handles? I'll put them in the show notes as well. But
oh crap, I don't know. What are my handles?
I'll hunt them out and I'll put them in the show notes.
What are my handles?
Check out the show notes.
It's this
is setting expectation of
Matthew J. Distefano on Instagram.
Awesome.
Fantastic. And Facebook.
Oh, there you go. So you're unified as well. Okay.
Yes, I'm in the unified field.
Okay, I'm writing that down. Awesome. What's next for you? What do you got? What do you got in the works? Because you've written all these books. You've got your podcast. You launched a new podcast also. You've got another podcast as well. I don't know if it's that new. It's probably about a year old now. Is it your
Yeah, the bonfire sessions is a year. Yeah, it's a year old. Super unscripted. It's like literally just a conversation. Heretic Happy Hour is more of a early morning radio show. It's kind of sticky. You got sound bites and all that kind of stuff.
Nice.
Bonfire sessions is way more laid back. Yeah, I don't know. The booklets are coming out. Well, one just came out on 420.
Nice.
And we're very childish.
It's all about God in nature, right? And
it's ecology, permaculture.
That was your bonfire sessions booklet, right? To clarify for people.
Yes, the bonfire sessions. It's the subtitle is spring.
Before people are rushing to Amazon in disappointment.
Yes. Sorry to disappoint you. Spring and summer comes out in July. October is the autumn session. We're doing 4 next year in 2021. We'll do a whole box set and all that. So we're working on that right now.
So what are these booklets capturing? Is this capturing some of the conversations that you've had on the podcast and some elements from it, or?
Yeah, it's as close to like a transcript as you could get with it while making it still readable, Okay. So it's edited a bit, just because of the nature of a book, Yeah. So, but it's as close to unscripted and just having a conversation. He's more of a Buddhist type thinker, Alan Watts and all those guys. And
nice.
So,
okay. Oh man, I have him back on the podcast then.
Alan Watts?
Well, not Alan Watts probably, but
he died. Man.
I know, sorry. Dude. That's going next level Buddhist.
yeah.
Where's his next incarnation? We'll just have him on.
Yeah, you gotta go seek him out. Yeah.
No, it sounds like, is Michael your co-host? Is that right?
Yeah.
It sounds like he'd be a great person to have on. Yeah. Because I love. I mean, I was talking with who was I talking with? This Andre, I think, a couple of weeks ago on the podcast. We were talking about like being present. We were talking about prayer and contemplation. And I was like, it's fascinating to me. We don't spend more time exploring Eastern mysticism. These are the guys that have this part of spirituality down. You know what I mean?
Totally.
If I'm going to ask like someone about like, I'd really like to know how to be present, I'm not going to go to a Christian. I'm sorry. I'm going to go to a tradition that spent like, 3, 4, 5,000 years figuring out how to be present. Like I'm going to figure that someone in that tradition is going to have more to say about this, more likely than not. So kind of their thing. I'm a big fan of that. So yeah, that's cool.
Cool. Yeah.
Awesome.
I've also I'm really excited about, I've got like, I don't even know what to call it. It's called The Genesis of Violence. I'm working with an artist who's like drawing. I like interpreted the book of Genesis through a sacrifice, like talking about sacrifice and all that. And he's doing artwork for it. So it's going to be pretty dope.
It's going to be like a kid's book kind of style.
Super violent, bloody though.
Like smashing in Abel's head.
Yeah. Dude, it's going to be gnarly because I've seen he hasn't done color yet where he's done with all the outlines.
You better have a lot of red.
Dude, it's so cool. Like some of them would make great tattoos, but it's brutal. And then you realize, wow, Book of Genesis is really violent. Holy shit.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing to me. It always fascinates me because obviously you sit down with a kid. I don't have kids, but I love doing this with other people's kids. They got like a kid's Bible or whatever with the pictures. And I'm always fascinated because like, kids don't go, oh, let's turn to like Job or let's jump into like, Song of Solomon, 2 really inappropriate passages for, the whole thing's inappropriate for kids. But like, they open it at the beginning every time, right? A kid wants to start at the beginning and work their way through a book. That's how kids want to it's how humans read a book. We've been trying to train for that. So that every time the kids are opening at Genesis and I'm like, dude, starts out okay, but very quickly transcends PG-13, right? Very quickly this gets really sketchy, and it's really fascinating to see what they skip over. I'm really intrigued by stuff like that. So I love the idea of like, what was the project? It was a project where they like basically created the whole Bible out of, it was Lego Bible project, was it? I think they created the whole Bible out of Lego, and so you could put in any Bible passage, and it would take you to like a scene that they made out of Lego people. And I mean, those people were covered in ketchup 20% of the time,
at least,
but it's amazing. You open Genesis and you go, oh my gosh, like we forget where we've come from. I think we forget that this whole thing didn't appear in a vacuum. You know, it appeared in a serious like mess, a really big mess. It's the Abraham thing of like, they're not shocked that God asked Abraham to kill his son. They're shocked that Abraham didn't at the end, right? That culture, even when the ram showed up, would be like, wow, oh, he wants me to sacrifice the lamb as well, maybe. You know, like,
right. Just in case.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just in case my son isn't enough, but we're definitely doing the son, right? You know, it's just like we forget this is the culture we're talking about in Genesis. And so I think stuff like that is really powerful. I think it's really, really powerful at telling that narrative, at highlighting the violence and the brutality. I know a lot of people hated that Noah movie. Do you remember that? Everyone got, oh man, people lost their shit over that, didn't they? Like, he's got rock people, you know, he's grabbed bits, but a lot of it was from like Epic of Gilgamesh. It was like from different historical.
I remember people getting like, oh, that was He's like, Dad, this isn't real. How could it? And I was like, have you read Enoch?
Yeah,
I was
blended a lot of different myths in there. But what's fascinating about it, I thought the author, the creators of that did really well at grabbing a hold of like what the point of Noah is for that original audience, which is this is a really messed up world. It's brutal, it's violent, it's horrific, and here's a bastion of hope, a man in this like entire world that is forging a different way. He lives off the land. He's not, you know, living off of this violent, punitive concept. He's just loving God and following him in creativity and in goodness. And he isn't a part of the evils of empire building and scapegoating and, you know, all these terrible evils, agriculture and whatever else, which that was the point of Genesis, right? It was very anti-agricultural. It's really cool. I'm definitely going to keep an eye out for that because I want to check that out for sure.
Cool.
You got big competition though, because I mean the Lego is
I'm gonna have to check that out.
It's funny, man. You'll like it. But dude, thanks so much for coming on. It was really
thanks for having
chatting,
me.
Getting to know you a bit. Love to have you again at some point as well. But it's been really fun.
Oh, man.
Good to get to know you. I'm sure we'll keep in touch as well.
Let's do that.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
And I'll let you know when it drops as well.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Awesome. Well, love you, man. I'll catch you later. Yeah.
You too. Peace.